Good morning, everybody. We're very privileged this morning to have Dr. Mark Pitstick. He has an illustrious involvement with afterlife research going back many, many years. And he's currently has many interests, too many for me to name, so I'm going to hand over to him straight away. Dr. Pitstick, over to you.
There'll be three parts of what I share today. And the first is a little background so you know about me and my journey. Secondly, what I'll be presenting at the AREI conference this coming up in about 7 weeks, September 13th through 16th in Scottsdale, Arizona. And then thirdly, some time for questions. So let's get started. First of all, there's some good evidence and from multiple and objective sources that I didn't totally forget where I came from when I came to Earth. Things like when I was 6 years old, telling my parents that a beautiful sunset reminded me of God. Two different psychics telling me independently that I wasn't the type of soul who usually came to Earth, and I was an advanced teaching soul, and that I carried with me an army of helpers, angels, guides, etc. A woman who just passed, Dottie Aislinn, at age 92, who had been able to see energy and auras her whole life and told me I had a energy configuration that she had only seen 4 times in her entire life. And each time she interviewed these people, because it was so unique, basically a golden hump at the top of my thoracic spine, which emitted sparkling light. And which was interesting because when I was a child, my nickname was Marky Sparky. And like, could these people have seen, unconsciously that? And the others, as well as I, had this overwhelming sense of there was something we were supposed to do. Taylor Caldwell wrote a book called The Magnificent Obsession. I certainly felt like that. So throughout my life, I felt like a stranger in a strange land. At some point, I realized I had to learn how to be an earthling because human ways seemed so foreign. We'd be watching a football game, and I loved sports, and I was always involved in athletics. But there was also this voice in my head that said, if we spent just 1/10 of the money and time and energy we spent on these football games to feed the poor and help the starving and so on, we could solve our world's problems. Early on, I became aware of some clairaudient gifts, not always, not on demand, but sometimes, especially in church, and especially when I was around other people who had abilities. And those were some of my seminal teachings that still direct me to this day: the nature of heaven, there not being a fiery eternal hell, we each being an integral, beloved, infinite part of all that is, etc. So that certainly changed my life. When I was growing up, people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I told them either a physician or a counselor or a minister. And as it turned out, I became all three. I had 11 years of college, 7 graduate school, plus lots of postgraduate training. But it started working in hospitals part-time, worked my way through college and grad school as a respiratory therapist and being around many people as they died. During cardiac resuscitations and so on, I was on the code team. And seeing that, especially little children dying, just brought me to my knees. Along with that, the first love breakup, a 4-year relationship, and you may have gone through that fun one. And then also realizing I did not want to become a medical doctor, which was my number one goal, because after working in hospitals for several years, I saw that the people who took the most medications, that had the most surgeries, were the least, not the most healthy. And so basically that was a perfect storm for me, which rocked my world and caused me to just rethink, research everything up to that point. So we're talking now age 22. It was a bit difficult at the time, but looking back, it was a huge blessing because really I died in a way. And that left then a clean slate for me to then find out, what do I think? And I was prepared for the worst. It hadn't been that long since I went through Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. So I thought perhaps this idea of there being a God and an afterlife was just human inability to accept are being alone, and when you die, that's it. But I launched a 25-year period of searching, theology school, clinical psychology master's, and then holistic chiropractic physician, because that was and still is the only doctoral profession that looked at body, mind, and spirit. I trained with everyone I could get hold of, spent a week with Brian Weiss, a week with Raymond Moody. At some point, I realized if I started a radio show, I could get to interview all these great minds. And so I did that, the first one being called Soulutions. We're talking now the late 1990s, and interviewed people like Wayne Dyer and Michael Newton, author of Journey of Souls and founder of Life Between Lives Therapy. And so I got to talk to these men and women before the show, on breaks, afterwards, establish relationships with them. Bernie Siegel, I mean, just what amazing people who had also been through the fire, as perhaps some of you have been, and emerged from it stronger and wiser and here to serve. After that period, then I began putting together, I started off with actually a cardboard box of information. And every time I would read an article or have a thought or learn something, I would write it down. And at some point, I realized I had 2 cardboard boxes overflowing with information. And I literally spread them out on the floor. And okay, this would go in the introduction, and this would go in the spiritual chapter, and so on. And that's how I put my first book together, Balanced Living. Then Soul Proof, all the evidence I could find that clearly showed that life continues on after physical death. My fiance, Andy, who's a screenwriter, wrote a screenplay then for Soul Proof, and we created the Soul Phone documentary film, a 93-minute film where we interviewed many people who had, near-death experiences, after death, communications, miraculous experiences, and so on. At some point, I became involved in Eternia, which was started by John Audette and Eben Alexander, and that's where I met Gary. Gary was the chairman at the time, and I was the vice president. And Gary was also a guest on my second radio show called Ask the Soul Doctors, where I interviewed Carolyn Mason, Anita Morjani, and others. Well, Gary and I hit it off and kept in touch. And basically 2 years ago, he asked me if I might consider getting involved with his research and being the mouthpiece for his work. And it's interesting, we're meeting today because I haven't heard from him yet today, but on Friday, he said there's a very good chance that after this weekend, he will be able to announce the first fully functioning prototype of the first soul phone device called the Soul Switch, which will allow binary yes/no answers from those, quote, in spirit. So very exciting times we're living in. I'm on the board of Helping Parents Heal and write their part of their newsletter, the Q&A for that. I have lectured at thousands of places over the years, expos, a lot of Unity churches, you name it, traveled all around the country. Sometimes one person would attend. So the least I've ever spoke to is one person, most I ever spoke to is 500. And I'm truly at the point now where I don't see a lot of difference, because I know that there's a rhyme and a reason to life, a beautiful, sacred balance to life that's way beyond our ability to see. So I just every morning wake up, and this is something I learned from Wayne Dyer and Bernie Siegel, and ask, how may I serve? And then I do to the best of my ability, and I let it go. Every day I get many emails from people, bereaved parents. And by the way, we have a new term, bereaved/shining light parents. So the word bereaved refers to those who are deep in grief, maybe fearing they won't see their loved ones again, so much pain. Shining light parents and family members refer to those who realize, at least somewhat, that their dear one who has passed on is now literally a shining light, and they're experiencing unimaginable levels of joy and peace and gratitude and enthusiasm, and they want us to do the same. So Suzanne Giesemann actually introduced that shining light parents term, and we really love it. It's important it's an important distinction. So that's a little bit about me and what I'm doing. I guess the last thing I want to mention is that Dr. Schwartz and I realized partway through about a year ago that while the Soul phone is very important, it'll be the first university-based technology to allow communication with. I mentioned the first device, the Soul Switch. He expects within a year of that to have what's called the Soul Keyboard, because a keyboard, just like you're sitting in front of, is just an assembly of switches, 43 or so. And he thinks it will just be a relatively simple engineering feat to then be able to text with, type with those to have changed worlds. The third device, Soul Voice, allowing to hear, much like you hear on your phone, and then Soul Video, allowing Skyping, Zooming sessions. I should mention that part of how he's been able to come up with this is what we call the A-Team, group of luminaries: Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, or David Bohm are probably the top four who have come through independently with about a half a dozen of the top evidential mediums in the world, feed bits of information to Gary. And we had a session a few months ago when I was in Tucson where I was able to communicate with them through Rhonda Schwartz, Gary's wife. And I asked if and when we have the Soul Video device working, would you all, referring to these geniuses who are in spirit, be willing and able to give webinars to us to help us solve our world's biggest problems? And Rhonda started laughing and she said, they're pushing each other out of the way to get first in line. And Tesla said, if you think I had some great inventions while I was on Earth, wait till you see what I've been working on lately. And the word, I mentioned I have some clairaudience. The term free energy popped in my head big time. So, sometimes it seems frustrating and discouraging, and like, can we really make a difference? Is there really any hope, especially with our current leadership in the U.S.? And the message is that there is hope, and there's a very good chance that we're living in a time where there will be this breakthrough. We have a real chance to create peace and harmony on the planet. So don't give up. Part of your heart song throughout your life. This is a time to shine now, to reach down deep, do whatever you need to do to get balanced, and share your greatest gifts, because each one of us is an important piece of that puzzle. Now, I mentioned the second part is what I'll be presenting at AREI. And the first thing I will be helping some with bereaved/shining light parents. There'll be a time for them, and I'll also be there for them full time. In other words, when I come to serve to a conference like this, I'm there to serve. And so I will certainly be able to help people who have had a loss of a loved one, quote, loss. Excuse me. We just had our all of our wooden floors finished in our home, and it stirred up a little bit of dust, to say the least. The second thing I'll be doing is an angel wash, and it's a energetic assembly, kind of like walking through a gauntlet of people. It replicates as closely as we can what is called the healing shower and the reunion. When a person passes on, we know about these. Two people have had documented near-death experiences. So when you drop the body and when you're greeting them by your loved ones, high fives, hugs from your, what I call higher energy assistants, angels, guides, master teachers, a healing shower, washing away any of the negative, the dirty laundry you've carried over with you from the earthly experiencing, and reminding you who you are, reminding you of this being of love and light. That is what we do in the angel wash. We got some recent information. A woman named Brenda experienced the angel wash last year, and she recently passed on. Well, she was in contact very quickly with two of the top evidential mediums in the world, Suzanne Wilson and Suzanne Giesemann, independently. And she told them, it's wonderful over here. The reunion I experienced was amazing. it was so much like the angel wash that we did at ARAI. So if you want to get a preview of what it feels like. By the way, Ken Ring, professor at University of Connecticut, who's worked with more people who've nearly died than anyone on the planet, except maybe PMH Atwater, said if you want to know how good it feels when you drop the body, especially if you're aged or infirm, he said, recall your 100 best days on earth, your happiest, energetic. Now multiply that by 1,000,000. And you begin to get a sense of how good it feels to fully remember who you are, and that it's not that you re-enter the light, you never left. You know, any sense of separation is an illusion, an optical delusion, because we go by the senses so much. And then the third thing I'll be presenting in 7 weeks is called Ask the Soul Doctor. So we'll have 45 minutes for you to ask your biggest, toughest questions. No doubt I've heard them. I started mentioning before, every day I get multiple emails from people whose children have died, people who have been murdered, people who are suicidal. And so because of my training experience, I'm able to sit with the worst of the worst. I have long articles on everything. I've developed tools. And so bring your toughest problems, and I'll guarantee you won't stump me. So if you haven't signed up yet, it's pretty much the chance of a lifetime. I saw on the website, Leigh said, basically it's a love-in, and it is. There is so much love, energy, compassion. You know, one of the biggest things I've discovered to stay on the path and stay awake is to have a circle of kindred spirit. And events like this symposium help us really know that we're not alone. And to get together so many people, you know, if there's just one of us, we're weird. But if there's a whole room full, we're not weird. So that's what I'll be presenting. At this point, I'm glad to open up to questions, any questions you have.